Hello, my name is Pule Mulebatsi. You're watching Bophelong on SABC News. Before we get into today's story, we would like you to have a look at this.
Get your hand off me.
Come here.
What?
Where were you?
I'm not talking to you about this. I'm not talking to you about this. Get your hand off me.
Who was there?
Get your hand off me.
Who was there? Tell me who was there.
People are looking at us. People are looking at us. Will you get your hand off me? Stop. People are looking at us. What's wrong with you?
Honestly, we're fine.
I'm grand, thanks. Okay, because someone will call the police if you carry on doing that to someone.
Okay.
Because if I don't, someone else will.
Okay. It's perfectly fine.
You don't have to put up with that, Alan. Okay. Thank you.
My office is there. You're definitely all right.
Yeah, I am.
Problems just come and knock you.
I'm grand, thanks. What do I do what? Do you ever listen to me?
Chrissy, stop. You're crazy.
Talking at you for the last 10 minutes and you haven't listened. You haven't gotten into what I'm saying to you. Then you're not even listening to me, that's what. Why do I push you like that? Because you won't fucking respond to me about any, you won't listen to me. You think you're fucking all manly.
I wasn't.
No, you can't be. No, you can't be. Don't try and walk away. Stop. Listen to me when I'm talking. Don't try and away from me. Stop it. What the What the shit? There's nothing. Don't give me that, okay? Pathetic. You're so pathetic.
This video was shot as an awareness campaign for men abuse in England. It is shocking that many still find it amusing when a male is abused. As we just saw in this video clip, many still find the idea of a female physically or emotionally abusing a male as something to laugh about. Why do you think that is? Please do share your thoughts on our email address, bophelongshow@sabc.co.za, and of course on social media. You can find us on Twitter @bophelongshow. Now this next story will definitely change your perception about male abuse in South Africa. He was in an abusive marriage for 8 years. Now have a look at this.
While the majority of domestic violence victims are women, abuse of men happens far more often than you'd probably expect. Typically, men are physically stronger than women, but that doesn't necessarily make it easier to escape violence in relationships. Mashilo Mnisi's story is one of the many untold stories of countless men who've lived through the taboo that is male abuse. For 8 years, Mashilo lived through physical and emotional abuse from his spouse.
I'm quite a reserved person. When I was growing up, I wouldn't even play with other, kids around. So I loved my space so much. And my mother used to say, well, I wasn't going to get married or something like that. But anyway, that's who I was. I liked my own company, and I was shy, when I was growing up. The people who would not speak even in class.
Although he wasn't a ladies' man and never had much of a social life, Mashilo spent his time studying and committed to his education. He moved to Johannesburg after completing his matric to study journalism at the University of Johannesburg.
I worked for that NPO, which was dealing with the LGBTI issues. From there, I had a live-in partner, and on whom we spent at least, I think, 7 to 8 years, and we have a son together from there. So because of the possessions that she had, she started to become jealous, you understand? Coming from a journalistic background, you had to have all these kinds of contacts in your with you. So then every contact that I had, which actually directed me to women, she wouldn't like it, and then she would fight over it. Then, I took it lightly from there. I just took it, as she was a woman. Women have got that tendency, of jealousy. So then I'd never take it seriously. Up until then, we started getting involved in some violent, behavior.
Mashilo's career was on the rise, but his relationship was under a lot of strain. His partner began to feel as though he dedicated his time to his work, and she began to feel jealous.
I used to be alone, and I was never been involved in any fight with any boy or any person for that matter. So then when she started being violent towards me, that was the only first time I was involved in a fight with her, but jostling around with her, not beating her back, you understand? And then I tended to say, well, okay, what is this now? And because of what she was doing, I could go and actually report and say, well, okay, this is what's happening to me. What can I do? And then I wasn't being taken seriously as to that report. She's very violent. She would break things, in the house, especially when I would come back late, you understand? Because normally what happened was that she used to say, I must come over the weekend, between Friday and Saturday, I must come back home at least by 6. I must be there, you understand? Which means I had to respect her curfew, you understand?
Mashilo says his wife's violent behavior worsened as his career reached its peak. She would complain about the number of female associates that he had and would go through his phone to check for signs of infidelity.
At one point, she threw a glass on my neck. I was just sitting and talking to my friends the other day, and then she was angry with a lady next door. I don't know what they were talking about. And then she came from the door angry, and then she pulled out a glass and then she threw me on the neck, you understand? And then I had to go to hospital, the Rand Clinic. And from there, things started being not, well between myself and her.
The family tried to resolve the conflict in the marriage, but nothing changed. Mashilo then tried to resolve the conflict by coming home early and spending more time with his family.
One thing that she believed in is that, you can only fix things by beating someone. That's how I understood it. Because every time when we had a quarrel or we misunderstand each other, she would become violent.
Things spiraled out of control when Mashilo fell ill. He was admitted to hospital where he was diagnosed with arthritis.
As the last straw, she actually tore all my clothes, my wardrobe, at one stage, and that was the last time when we separated. And then, but we tried to mend things, to be back together, but it never worked up until the final moment that we separated.
Mashilo was relieved that he was free from his abusive relationship, but it seemed for him to be free, he had to also lose his relationship with his son. When his spouse left him, she closed all communication lines between them.
Bophelong resumes right after a break. Do stay with us.
Technology is all around us and is improving lives across Africa, like how young Nigerians are connecting to the internet. There are doctors finding new ways to save lives in Cameroon, and the South African public transport system that is now getting Wi-Fi. We have gadgets, apps and loads more, some of which play a big role in Africa's growth. A huge part of this African growth is technological innovation. To find out a bit more about social media and technology news from here in Africa and abroad, join me, Phumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. on SABC News.
SABC News, we've got Africa covered.
Welcome back. You're watching Bophelong with me, Pule Molebatsi. Before the break, we saw how Mashilo Mnisi, who after being abused by his former partner, broke the silence of domestic male abuse. Being a victim made him aware that he was not the only one going through spousal abuse, but helped him to be a mouthpiece to many others like him out there. Let's take a look at how he broke the silence in his community.
After his separation from his abusive partner, Mashilo finally broke free. His biggest challenge was to pick up the pieces of his life, so he looked for platforms where he could break the silence on male abuse.
With those challenges I faced, I said, okay, I felt that, even all these men are being abused. And to me, I think men, I want you to, if you were quoting it, to say, well, I think men are mostly being abused than even women, like most of us, we can think of, because there are so many challenges in terms of the financial, challenges, in terms of, if you look at the power relation, I just given you my story to say, well, the live-in partner left because I was not working after I was hospitalized. You understand? So most of women cannot even stay, especially in South Africa. They don't stay if a man is not generating any revenue.
Mashilo formed Moshate, an organization that rehabilitates men who experience domestic violence. This was a form of empowerment for himself, helping him deal with the abuse he had faced in his life.
The first thing that I did, I felt that we need to address this abuse against men. And then I started doing my own research around with other men that I knew around. And then they started to recount the same stories that I had, you see. And then from there, I wrote them down, trying to tie up a concept so that we can be able to propose to whoever who wanted to support our initiative. Then, yeah, that's what happened. I found similar stories of abuse in terms of many ways. First of all, to start this organization, I realized that a lot of men were being abused and they were not being taken seriously by the authorities or anything for that matter. Even government, there were no government programs that were being started to address abuse against men. And then I saw, I knew power, people opposing women abuse. And then later on, I knew of Sonke Gender Justice Network. But now when I approached them, because they claimed that they were dealing with men, when I approached them, I found that they were in fact another power, but the approach is very different from power because they gather men to talk about abuse against women. So then I said, well, which means even at this era, men are not being represented in every sphere. Then that's the one reason that prompted me to start the organization. Having seen that, the police, the court of law, and any other public service provider, they were not actually dealing with abuse against men. They were in fact neglecting the issues.
While South African law has begun to recognize male abuse, it is still difficult for them to receive the necessary support.
We had a son, and normally, women, a lot of women have got this propensity or ideology, you see, to say, not the ideology per se, but mentality, to say they've got this automatic custody when you separate or you divorce. So the same happened to me between myself and her. When we separated, she took away my son. And then I'm trying to reach to the son, not her, because now she's married to someone, you understand. And I don't want to to intervene in their marriage. So while I'm trying to reach out to my son, she has this thing to say, I don't want this man to see his son. I don't know why. I don't even understand why.
As a survivor of domestic abuse, Mashilo encourages men to speak out. He speaks of the importance of rehabilitating men and women together and encourages men to take charge of their situations and for women to be aware of the abuse that they put men through.
Some men, so they don't want to come out because they're scared somebody's gonna, it's like a laughing stock to them. When you say, hey, I've got a problem with my wife or whatever, then they say, you stupid, why don't you leave her? Why don't you give her hiding? Some people we're not meant for that, to fight with the ladies. So the only thing that you have to do, you just have to, to part ways.
Male abuse, it's not dealt with as much as women abuse. Yes, it's being downplayed, and there are a lot of male who are experiencing abuse out there, and of which they are even afraid to come out.
The best way, is just to come to our workshops and visit Mushate, and then we can be able. You'll meet some people like us. I mean, we've been through the experience, and then we can be able to articulate it more or better. You understand, to deal with your problems. You just come and visit our office. That's it.
The humiliation of male domestic abuse still grows regardless of the awareness and organizations formed to educate the public. When we return, we chat more about gender equality.
The Kenyan actress is the first from her country to win an Academy Award. Her Best Actress Oscar win has inspired many in Kenya.
Nyong'o's victory has made the headlines in all of the country's newspapers. This was Nyong'o's first role in a film after she had completed postgraduate studies in America.
Players in South Africa's music industry will attend the Music Exchange program in Cape Town, South Africa.
We as Africans, we have to embrace what is unique about us and about our music.
That's Afro Showbiz News, Saturdays, 7:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back to the show. We still continue with our topic of male abuse, as we saw earlier on from the story of Mashilo, that it doesn't matter what gender you are, abuse is still abuse. And in studio with me to talk about this is a senior researcher and a political analyst from WISA, Lisa Vetten. Lisa, welcome back to Bophelong.
Thank you very much.
So let's start off by looking at just how rife is spousal abuse in South Africa.
Well, if we look at if we break it down by gender, it's the most common form of violence that women experience. Men certainly do experience domestic violence, but not as frequently. So if we look at the research from the South African Stress Health Survey by UCT and Johns Hopkins University, that said about 14% of women experience domestic violence and about 1.3% of men experience domestic violence.
And just how do men deal with abuse different from how women would deal with domestic violence?
I think the effect it has on the two are very similar. I think what can be a bit more of a challenge for men is reporting. Some men have said when they go to police stations they get laughed at. Or people think, what sort of man are you that a woman hits you? So it's almost as if they have less respect for you because it's a woman that's hitting you, but they accept you being hit by a man. So I think that's the challenge that men can face.
Lisa, if you look at one of the person that we had on the show has been in an abusive marriage for 8 years. When does it start, the abuse? How does it even start in the marriage?
Well, sometimes Sometimes it can start pretty soon within a relationship, almost from the time you start going out. Sometimes it only emerges after the marriage when the relationship is consolidated and formal. But you often look at a lot of different signs. I think what makes a relationship abusive is the pattern of control that goes on in the relationship.
Yeah.
So I think when you start finding one partner suggesting to the other that they always make changes, that they change things about themselves, and that only they who are ever asked to change. The other partner never wants to make any changes. You know, when you start giving up what you enjoy doing, the way you dress, your friends, those sorts of things, those are not good signs. That seems to suggest you now are being controlled and you change your behavior for the other person.
So eventually you've been turned into this person that can be controlled, because most of the time people are wondering, I mean, a male is supposed to be physically strong. I bet you can clap back if you've been clapped in a marriage or in a relationship. So you're saying that it's a journey. So you are, firstly, could be emotional and mentally, and then it could get into the physical.
It could, and I think some relationships never actually become physically abusive. They always remain emotionally abusive. I think what we do see is we get different kinds of different kinds of abusive relationships. And I think there's the sort where you tend to find women abusing men tend to be the emotionally abusive relationships. You don't find them using as much physical abuse, and you certainly don't find them using the kind of abuse that puts men in hospital, for example. So you tend to find women using much more, I think, of emotional tactics in order to control and break down their partners.
And when you are being abused and you're a man, and I can imagine all the stigma that's attached to that and how you're going to feel humiliated, what do you do? What do you think is the first step to take?
Well, I think the first thing to do is to look at what's going on in the relationship, especially if somebody keeps on repeatedly apologizing and say it'll be different and they won't do this again, but they keep on breaking their promises. Then I think you need to take a step back and think really long and hard as to how this person is violating your trust, and do you actually want to trust them one last time just to abuse you again? Because I think you need to come to the realization that things are bad. They're not going to change. You can't hope for them you can't really hope for them to change any longer. And what can change is how you are dealing with the situation. We can't always change other people, but we can change ourselves. So I think the important step at that point is to start thinking, what do I need to do differently? Do I want to leave? Do I want to go and see a psychologist? Do I want to involve my family? Do I want to report it to the police? But that's when you start thinking about your options.
And Lisa, would you say it's also okay that we encourage our men that it's okay to break down and seek help? It could be from a psychologist, from those around you, from your friends when you're being abused. Should we start there?
I think we always should. Human beings are essentially social. And if you try to carry a problem by yourself, it makes it that much harder. Whereas I think talking to other people can break down that sense of loneliness and isolation. And sometimes in talking to others, you discover you're actually not that alone. And sometimes you think that your responses or your feelings are strange and peculiar, but you discover that they're not. So that's a very important first step, talking to others.
Okay, and we've got like organizations such as Power and all that deal with both genders in terms of the abuse. How come the message is not getting out there enough? How come there aren't any changes still?
Well, I think one of the things we must acknowledge is that actually men are at far less risk of being abused by women than they are by men. So I think we might not be seeing, the problem is certainly there amongst men, but it's not as significant amongst women.
Sure.
And I think one of the most important changes we can make is for men to not only speak out about the violence they might be experiencing with their female partner's hands, but also the violence they experience from each other. Because I think we make violence normal for men, whether it's women or men, and we expect them to keep quiet, that it's part of a man to show you're not a sissy and you're not a weakling, that you just take it. And I think if men start challenging whoever the violence comes from and says that violence is not part of being a man, nor is keeping quiet and not speaking out, that might be the first step. But I think at this point in time, we expect women to be victims, but when men are victims, we don't give them the space to be vulnerable. And I think if we were to change that, that might help shift the sorts of gender norms that we need to change in this country to do away with all forms of violence.
And those that are put on the other side of this, those that are being trained to offer support, how do we prepare them in a way that a man can feel comfortable enough to go to a police station and report that they've been physically, emotionally, or mentally abused without them looking at them like, but how? What do you mean you're being abused? I don't even think, I can't picture that.
Yeah.
How do we train our our police, for example, if you want to go to a police station and report this, that they best handle this?
I think we need to give them gender training, because when women come in, they treat women badly because they think women didn't behave like proper women. And when men come in, they treat men badly because they think the man hasn't behaved like a proper man. So we need to give them gender training that breaks down the stereotypes about how men behave and how women should behave. And they should understand that abuse is abuse. The feelings are pretty much similar. The laws are exactly the same. And you need to treat people in the same way. And you need to take abuse seriously, whether it's a woman reporting or a man reporting. Because I think the sad fact is the police just don't like domestic violence, regardless of who the victim is.
So you're saying that our social coding, how we treat men and women is quite different, and those that are put in a position to assist us, they also themselves grew up in the setting where they're told a woman is supposed to act in this way and a man is supposed to act in this way. So it's very important as well that even as parents we teach our young men about gender, that it doesn't specifically put you in a certain space and it separates you from the next person, and how that will eventually coach you to be a responsible man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think if we can challenge the little box called man and the little box called woman and encourage people to step out of those boxes and be what they're comfortable being, we would all feel a lot freer and perhaps happier.
And Lisa, while we were researching this show, we were trying to find statistics. We went online, we looked at the messages that are out there, and there wasn't proper statistics in South Africa. How do we get the message out there that our men are being abused and put all the information out there so that it doesn't remain so much of a taboo?
Well, I think we do have some statistics. As I said, we've got that 14% and 1.3% from the Stress and Health Survey. We've got some police data, but I think generally we don't have very good systems of information collection in South Africa. So I think if we were to look at from the police, to start challenging them to collect the statistics on that men or women who are reporting rape or domestic violence, that would certainly help us. That would be a good starting point. And I think also when people go to the casualty, if doctors and nurses started asking who hit you, whether the victim is male or female, that would also start giving us statistics, and would also start giving the message that you should ask who hurts other people, and when they tell you, you must refer them for help, not just stitch them up and send them home again.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate the information that you're sharing with us this afternoon, Lisa. Right, and that's how we wrap up today's program. Be sure to tune in tomorrow at 12:30 to catch the repeat. As from me and the rest of the Bophelong team, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Goodbye.